The conclusion section acts as a reminder of the main outcomes of your work. A good conclusion for a scientific paper reminds the reader of what you accomplished with your research and why it is beneficial to your field of study. Conclusions should never provide new information, but rather review the most important connections in the paper. When writing the conclusion, remember the hourglass shape from the first video. The conclusion should mirror the introduction in scope. It's like the bottom half of the hourglass. At the beginning of the conclusion, you should remind the audience of your hypothesis or research aims without repeating statements that have already been made. This portion is typically 1 to 2 sentences. Next, review the main points from the body of your paper. Highlight the findings that correspond closely with your research aims and hypothesis. A good technique to use when writing this portion is to read each paragraph in the body of your paper and take note of the most important ideas or facts presented within. Try to avoid repetitive language when reviewing these points. The remainder of the conclusion section is simply about conveying many of the ideas presented in your discussion, but on a higher level of abstraction. Note that this part is not required for all research papers. Be sure to follow your instructor's guidelines. In your discussion section, you made some important connections between your research aims and your results. In the conclusion, you get to communicate what that means for your field of study and how it is significant or beneficial. You can discuss what you have learned from the research and note your contributions to the field. If there are questions that remain unanswered, or if further research could provide more insight into the area of study, you can offer suggestions for additional studies. When you've finished writing the conclusion, you may ask yourself, have I provided an adequate overview? Here are the key points for writing an effective conclusion in a scientific paper. Never introduce new information. Summarize your main findings. This section should mirror the shape of the introduction in scope. Begin with a callback to the hypothesis and highlight the most important outcome. Indicate the importance of the research and how it contributes to the field. These portions are optional, but if additional studies should be done, you can identify any unanswered questions and provide recommendations for further studies. Now that you understand how to write a comprehensive conclusion section, let's move on to the final component of the scientific paper, the abstract.